1963, which is the preeminent international food standard setting body. Together, the Codex Alimentarius and the WTO has formed a system of rules which ensure that food is safe, good quality, and can be fairly traded. WTO SPS and TBT agreements also work in tandem with international standard setting bodies to encourage the harmonization. We do understand objective of Codex Alimentarius is ensuring consumers' health protection, ensuring fair trade practices, and it works on the core value of collaboration, inclusiveness, consensus building, and transparency. Hence, considering all these crucial elements of Codex, I hope and believe that in today's session, wherein we have senior experts from FSSAI, industry, consumer organization, and academia, who will be sharing their knowledge and expertise that will definitely help our participants about Codex perspective, overview, its key importance, success stories of India, and etc. And this will be followed by a Q&A session. And here, I would request all participants, should you have any question with the panel members, please do write in the chat box so that we can take up towards the end of the session. Hence, with this, we request all to be part of this webinar and understand the regional and national perspective in this embarking journey of Codex. I hope participants would definitely find this very useful and would also request to actively involve in interactive session. And do, if you also want to engage with FICCI Codex Cell, do write to us. We want more participation in various Codex working groups so that we can frame better responses and position for India. With this, now I invite Chairperson Ma'am for delivering an inaugural address and share an insight with the participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Abhinav. And I'm really glad that FICCI India and Food Ingredients Asia Singapore are jointly organizing this webinar to discuss what I believe is very relevant in the context of unveiling the opportunities for global trade in the context of the Codex. We've just we are transiting through a pandemic, and I believe we are still in the midst of it. And this has had consequences for world trade. And even today, we see in some geographies that there is some skepticism around food imports from other countries. So I believe that this particular webinar can help us to identify a roadmap to ensure food safety, protect public health, and to promote economic development. Both the food standards and trade do work together to address the issues around nutrition, safety, and sustainability across the food value chain in order to address global demand for food. And I think it's impossible to imagine food trade without standards, because it is the food standards themselves which provide some confidence to the importing countries about the safety, quality, and authenticity of what's being traded, and eventually builds consumer confidence. Food standards, by their very nature, must be stakeholder-oriented, and they have to facilitate trade by addressing aspects that are relevant to the producers, to the policymakers, the governments, and to the consumers. So in a context such as this, I think what the world really needed was an international intergovernmental platform like the Codex Alimentarius Commission in order to deal with trade in an interconnected world. You rightly mentioned the origins post-World War II, as countries began to trade much more intensively. They developed their own food laws and standards, and these differing standards inevitably gave rise to trade barriers that were of increasing concern. And that led to some pressure on the governments to harmonize the various food standards. And I think the birth of the Codex Alimentarius Commission then in '63 was, in a sense, a response to these pressures and to the growing needs of a world that was actually exploding in economic terms post-World War II. India, as we all know, has from the outset been a very active participant in the Codex. We've even occupied the highest position of chairperson of Codex for a term. And recently we have been the regional coordinator for Asia also. Since 63, the Codex Alimentarius Commission that we now talk about as just Codex, we don't say the whole thing, has been shouldering the important responsibility for laying down global parameters of quality and safety of food products for human consumption, working through the subject committees or the subsidiary bodies, including the regional coordinating committees. Its stated objectives are consumers' health and fair trade practices in global trade of food products. Because the Codex has adopted a science-based framework to develop globally acceptable trade standards, it does remain a yardstick for the safety of human health and fair trade practices. What has been a challenge, and I believe that Codex has tried to address it, is to help developing countries to apply its standards, to strengthen their national food control systems, and to take advantage of international food trade opportunities. The increasing level of participation by countries in the work of Codex shows that despite difficulties, despite their own challenges, countries value the open technical discussions and agree that they are useful to find an international consensus towards which rules and regulations for trade and these standards can evolve. But realizing some of the challenges for developing countries, the Codex Trust Fund was set up some years ago. And the idea was to strengthen both the awareness and participation of developing countries in the Codex processes. And it's done good work, but in my view, its focus has been on awareness and participation and less on the need for actually providing technical inputs into the decision-making process and to orient the discussions towards local needs and local requirements. So I believe that that is a gap that really needs to get addressed for developing countries in the years ahead through the Codex Trust Fund, now that we need to go into generation 2 of the work there. You did talk about the SPS and TBT agreements. These are the key trade agreements that have implications for food and food trade. Both the SPS and TBT agreements acknowledge the importance of harmonizing standards internationally to minimize or eliminate the risk of sanitary, phytosanitary, and other technical standards becoming barriers to trade, and to encourage members within the limits of their resources to play a full part in the work of the Codex. Today, Codex standards have become an integral part of the legal framework facilitating international trade through harmonization. They prevent and assist in the resolution of trade disputes before the WTO in both SPS and TBT cases. I believe we can maintain this system that has been built if countries invest by participating in Codex. And that requires from all countries some level of effective preparation, which combined with some strategic participation in the international meetings of the institution gives the country the ability to influence the creation of standards in the areas it needs and to make sure that the standards developed do reflect the domestic concerns. And it is in this context that the work of the FICCI-SIFTI group is so very, very critical. Countries probably get the most value out of Codex when they prepare at the national level. It's essential for us to invest in a system that allows us to identify and prioritize are food safety and trade concerns. And the only way to do this is by bringing together the government health experts with officials of other government departments, such as agriculture, food, industry, trade, and the representatives of consumer groups, and to coordinate the consultation and the inputs from all these various stakeholders. It's by drawing on the knowledge and experience of these diverse but interconnected groups that a country is able to recognize what is in its own national interest and which measures can be instrumental in facilitating the access to export markets. I cannot overstate the importance of the private sector in activities relating to Codex, SPS, and TBC. It's producers and manufacturers who must contend with the requirements of food measures domestically as well as internationally. And therefore, they have to be a key partner in the development and application of food standards. And we do that level of engagement. In Asia, of course, we do need to still build capacities. Some of our countries are extremely advanced. Some of us are at the middle level, and some countries do need a lot of support. FAO and WHO have taken some initiatives in this direction. Codex member countries have also pooled in resources to provide support to least developed countries in the region. And there's a need for much more coordinated action in the region. India, and I'm happy to state that we have taken a leadership position and we have established Codex activities in many of our neighboring countries as part of a joint project of the Codex Trust Fund. Finally, let me say that I believe Codex provides us a general framework on which differing yet converging national food standards can be developed in order to protect not only the domestic consumers, but also global consumers by providing safe and quality food and thus building consumer confidence. I'm glad that in the course of this webinar, several of my senior colleagues and from both the Codex coordination point, but industry and consumer groups are going to give their inputs. Many of them have been long-term players in and participants from behalf of India in the Codex processes. And I'm sure that this certainly will help us to make a roadmap for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your kind words and insight. And you truly said, it's a time we need to involve and get together all the stakeholders who are working on the Codex space to have a very strong voice for India, because it has a very serious trade implication, which we don't, in totality, stakeholders, even industry or sometimes government body also, they do not understand. But here on this forum, ma'am, as you are here with us, I'll request my chair, Dr. Jasveer, and co-chair, Shreya, that we will look into it more deeply and we'll see how we can connect with all these government bodies together and help in putting a very strong position for India, ma'am, right? So that we have one voice and strong Indian voice, which can help us in having a very fair advantage in the global trade when it comes to. Jasveer, sir, any comments from your side for CP, ma'am?
I think it's really a pleasure to have ma'am here in the session, and definitely some of the points that she has given as a direction for us to strengthen so that we become an even more effective voice at the global stage. Those are things that we will consider and we will take into account while we build our roadmaps ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jasveer. Ma'am, CP ma'am, we will be in touch with you. We'll need your continuous guidance and support, ma'am, in Codex. I mean, so we will be requesting your time in future as well, ma'am, for this.
Certainly. We're all doing this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us. And have a great day, ma'am.
Sure.
Thanks. Now, with this, now may I request Mr. P Karthiken, who is our next speaker, to give his presentation. He will be sharing his thought on overview of Codex and its importance. And as we all know, Mr. Karthikeyan is Deputy Director with Codex at FSSAI, and one of the officials from FSSAI whom we are working very closely for last more than a decade, I would say. Karthikeyan sir, you have been a great help to the industry and to FICCI as well. And over to you, sir. Would you like to do a PPT, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be sharing my PPT.
Sure, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Abhinav. With the thoughts of our honorable chairperson, FSSA. So I would like to bring to show the participants, attendees. I think there are 100 participants are there to give light brief the backup of the codex and its importance to our national food control system. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Give me some 2 minutes. I will share my slides.
Sure, sir. And sir, we also have many of the participants joining through the YouTube link.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Is it visible to all?
Yes, sir, very much visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I am just starting. With the given time, I would like to brief about the codex structure and its base and working nature and its importance to our nations. As you know, in the global trade, so as per even as per the WTO, SPS, and TBT, there are 3 standard setting organization is there in the international forum. These organizations are even called are named as 3 sisters of the standard setting body. The first one is the plant health, that is IPPC, that is International Plant Protection Convention, to prevent and to control the introduction and the spread of the pest of plant and plant products. The another one is the animal health, that is in case of animal health, that is OIE. It is called as Office International des Epizooties, that is World Organization for Animal Health. It has the function on the animal health and the control of the animal disease. The third one is with respect to the food safety, that is to protect human health. The international standards setting body, as we are all very well know, that as Codex. So here in Codex, as stated by our honorable chairperson, because of the explosive in the trade in the international market, it gave pressures on the government and other private organizations to come up with the common global standards. So initially, there were several forums which were interested to develop some global standards or group of standards for the group of region. As such, initially one such forum was with the consent of EU states. A Codex Alimentarius European was established in 1958. Later that, there were several discussions in the FAO and WHO to have international global standards, uniform standards. So on 16th World Assembly in May 1963, it approved the joint FAO-WHO Food Standard Program and adopted the statute of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So it is a joint body of FAO and the WHO. So the commission held its first meeting in Rome in June 1963. After that, it currently meets annually, alternatively between the headquarters of the FAO and WHO Geneva. So in 1963, it started with the several member countries, that is 30, nearby 30 founding members. It started with the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Now, thereafter, India became a member of the Codex in 1964. The population covers mostly the 99% of the world's populations are contributing in the Codex standards development. The latest member which joined in the Codex Alimentarius Commission is the Timor-Leste on 2018. With that, now we are having 189 members of the Codex Alimentarius, that is 188 member countries and one member organization, that is EU. What does it do? The Codex Alimentarius adopts standards, gives codes of practices and guidelines. It's all these Codex standards are voluntary in nature. So the Codex is the parent, as I told, the parent is the intergovernmental body of the United Nations. The members are 188 member countries and one member organization. The function is adopts science-based standards. The main mandate of the Codex is safety of health of the consumers, fair practices in food trade. The process is inclusive. It includes all, even the single opinion of the even developing countries also taken into account while developing the standards. It is transparent. It adopts the 8-step process and 5-step process. The last one is consensus based. So all the standards and all the code of practices are made based on the consensus of the member countries. And in every committee, the chair of the committee, even the chair of the commission, the first duty is to have consensus among the member countries. So these are the various codex texts, that is product standards, like vertical standards and horizontal standards. It developed the all standards, that is standards for milk powders and cream powders, standards for fat spreads. These are all vertical standards. And with respect to guidelines, it gives guidelines. For example, guidelines for nutrition and health claims, general principle for the adoption of essential nutrients to foods. These are several guidelines they used to give, and several codes of practices are there. These codes of practices are, there are two types in codes of practices. One is to prevent any contamination. I mean to say, to prevent any contaminant and to comply with the level of the established level of MRL or MLs. They used to give the code of practices. That is, the first one is the code of practices for prevention and reduction of the mycotoxins. For example, the contaminants in the cereals. And sometimes they used to give a code of practices towards the hygienic practices. For example, code of practices for practices of hygienic practices in canned food, low acid foods, like that, they used to give the codes of practices. So regional code of texts, these are all prepared by the regional coordinating committees. For that region, for example, regional code of hygienic practices for street vendor foods in Asia, that is we prepared, and this is applicable in case of the Asian region. And also there are several standards also there, where the product is traded mainly in the region. For example, regional standard for fermented soybean paste and regional standard for chili sauce. These are the regional standards. So as I told that Codex Alimentarius Commission is UN body in Food and Agriculture Organization, World Health Organization. This is the apex body, Codex Alimentarius Commission, and below which there are two bodies are there. That is, one is Executive Committee and another one is various subsidiary bodies. So we can now compare with our FSSA system, that is Codex Alimentarius Commission. We can compare with our food authority, and the executive committee, maybe it's relevant as to the scientific committee. Then all the subsidiary bodies like us, what we are having, the various panels. So these are the same structure is there here. So under the subsidiary bodies, various Codex committees and even coordinating committees are also there. We'll see one by one. Under the Codex Alimentarius Commission, the executive committee is there. It consists of 1 chairperson, 3 vice chairperson, 6 regional coordinators, then 7 members elected on geographic basis. These 7 members can choose 1 or 2 advisors to them in the CC Exec Committee. And India is now the advisor to Japan. Then the Codex Secretariat, there is a secretariat like in FSSA, we do have a secretariat for panel and scientific committee. Their this main work is to coordinate all the meetings. The Codex Secretariat will be for the commission as well as for the various subsidiary bodies. So then we will see that active Codex subsidiary bodies. These are divided into general subject committees. There are some 10 active general subject subsidiary committees are there, and 4 Codex commodity committees are there, and 1 task force is there. And now I think in the meeting which is now going on CSE, 1 task force, that is task force on antimicrobial resistance, is now adjourned because they they have completed their work. Then we are having 6 regional coordinating committees. We will see quickly what are all these committees here. So these are the general subject committees. This usually this refers to the horizontal standard. They used to make food additives, ML for food additives and contaminants, and also maximum residue level for pesticides. For example, Codex Committee on Food Additives, which is hosted by China, and Codex Committee on Contaminants in Foods, hosted by Netherlands. Then Codex Committee on Food Hygiene, it is hosted by US. Then Codex Committee on Food Import and Export Certification System, hosted by Australia. This is mainly focusing on the all food import and control systems. It develops various document, third-party auditing and equivalency systems. Then Codex Committee on Food Labeling, Canada. Here also it develops all the documents related to the labelings. Recently, in the CSE committee, one of the document, that is non-retail container, it has been approved at step 8 in the CSE. Actually, this is proposed by India only. So CCGP, that is Codex Committee on General Principle. This is mainly deals with the rules and procedures. You know, there is one Codex Procedural manual is there. Then I will give a little bit small note on the this manual in my later slide. This mainly deal with that all the rules and regulations, statutes on the Codex. So any amendment and any new rules, if you want to propose that, the Codex Committee on General Principle, they used to deal and they used to propose amendment in the Codex Committee in the procedural manual. Then CCMAS, it is Codex Committee on Method of Analysis and Sampling. CCNFSDU is hosted by Germany. Mainly it deals with the nutrition. That is, it is a Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Users. Then Codex Committee on Pesticide Residues, hosted by the China. So it mainly deals with the MRLs of pesticides. Then the last one is CCRVDF, that is Codex Committee on Residues on Veterinary Drugs in Foods, hosted by US. It also provides MRLs for the various veterinary drugs which are used in the context of protecting the animal health. So there are ad hoc intergovernmental task force. Most of them have been dissolved, including the latest one, as I told, that is task force on antimicrobial resistance. What is this? Why this has been formulated and adjourned several times? Because if any issues or any matter which does not fall under any of the Codex subsidiary bodies, then the CSE will recommend to formulate a task force, interim task force. Till that time, it completes its task. For example, the antimicrobial resistance. Recently, they have established that antimicrobial resistance, this task force has given two guidelines on the code of practices for this um, in the context of antimicrobial resistance, and these two documents have been approved in this CSE. Then after this work, then in the CSE itself, they have decided to adjourn this task force. This task force will be reactivated as and when the works come or any new works comes. There are commodity committees. There are four commodity committees are there which are active. The CCFFP, that is Fish and Fishery Product, hosted by Norway. It is reactivated recently for the purpose of inclusion of one sardine fish species. So that has been reactivated. Then another committee is Codex Committee on Fats and Oils, that is hosted by Malaysia. It develops all the standards for fats and oils and its requirements. Then Codex Committee on Fresh Fruits and Vegetables, hosted by Mexico. Then one of which committee, that is Codex Committee on Spice and Culinary Herbs, hosted by India. In the last session also, we had meetings, and they have proposed 4 standards in the step 8, and several draft standards which are all have been approved in the recent CSE meetings. So commodity committee adjourned sign-in die. Here also these commodity committees used to put in sign-in die, that is adjourn sign-in die, because if the committee do not have any more work and the CC exec committee, while it's critically reviewing their work as well as the CSE, then they will recommend okay that this committee has no more work, so we will put it adjourned, that is sign in die. The recently such committee, one of the committee is Codex Committee on Processed Fruits and Vegetables, which was put and sign in day in the last CSE meeting. Now this committee may be again reactivated if the works come, if the issues come, if the member countries are feeling that there is a new work proposal, there is a requirement of development of some standards which is important globally, that is traded globally. So these committees may be then again reactivated, then they will work on the subject matter. Regional coordinating committees. These are the various 6 regional coordinating committees for the purpose of addressing the matters related to food in the region, and also to develop code of practices, and also to develop the regional standards. So these committees recommends various regional standards based on the trade in the region, and sometimes these regional standards also may be upgraded to the international standard based on the trade, based on the international trade. So CC Asia is one of the committee. Last time we were the coordinator for that Asia. Now the China is a coordinator. As I told, this is the Codex Procedural Manual. This is being revised, and the last edition is 27th editions. So this is the Codex Procedural Manual. You can see that we do also, for example, FSSI, we do have also some rules and procedure for working of the scientific panel, scientific committee, even FSSI, that is the Regulation Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, transaction of business of scientific panel and committee, like that. So based on that, we used to conduct the meetings, and we used to have the quorums and the procedures. We used to do that based on that regulations. Like that, this Codex Procedural Manual, it also outlines the agreed set of rules to ensure the commission as well as its subsidiary bodies work in one uniform manner. So this is not the way that as and when you feel, okay, I will conduct the meeting. No, as and when I will develop the meeting. No, we have to follow the procedure before initiating a meeting, and before initiating a new work proposals, and before initiating an amendment in any standards, that and all prescribed in the Codex Procedural Manual. It also gives help member countries how to participate effectively in the work of the joint FAO-WHO food standards program. It gives guidelines to the participants also, the participants delegation, how to speak, even it describes how to speak in the meetings, and it also gives guidelines to the delegates and member countries how to participate, how to give a comments, how to give a new work proposal, etc. So this will take one day to explain about the Codex procedural manual. Okay, if time permits, then we will have some time to discuss in detail about the Codex procedural manual. This is because this is the Bible of the Codex. We used to call this is the Bible of the Codex, even it is a green book, you know. So as well as I told you, this is Codex standards are science-based. So obviously, if the science is there, there should be a components of risk analysis. As you all know that the risk analysis is a defined process of consisting three distinct but closely linked components that all one is risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. These are all interlinked. We can talk more on this, how the Codex, do risk analysis, how it's used. That there is a separate chapter in the Codex procedural manual also that is in the last chapter, statement of principle in as a science. It deals it specifically says all these standards it should be science based and it is science-based and it should have the risk analysis. So these are the main three components, but because of the time, we cannot go in depth with this. As all people, they might know that risk assessment, risk management, risk communication, and all. I can say then a little this scientific risk analysis being carried out by the four, joint expert committees under the FAO WHO. They used to give the advices to all the subsidiary bodies, Codex Commission also. For example, JECFA, that is a Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, JMPR, Joint Meeting on Pesticide Residues, then JEMRA, Joint Expert Committee on Microbiological Risk Assessment, then JEMNU, Joint Expert Committee on Nutrition. They used to give the scientific advice to the risk manager, that is, that Codex Commission and the other subsidiary bodies. Okay, I have given the brief of the working principles, working of the Codex. But why Codex? What is its relevance to us? What its importance? I will just brief that. I wanted to give this slide of iceberg. This is the situation in Codex. This is Codex. The below-lying icebergs or developing countries. We are struggling. But the most of the work are done by the developing countries. They used to push forward all those work based on their production and based on their commodity trade in the international trade. So the above ones are developing countries. They will just, happy and enjoying the Codex event. So the thing is, the contribution to Codex is to be mainly in the developed countries. They used to have more participation in the development of standards and the development of codes of practices and other texts. So just I will give some major achievements in the Codex fraternity. Starting from 30 countries, now it is 188 countries plus one member organization, 16 international organizations to 224 observations. The budget is $55,000 to $8.8 million. Milk to, the first vertical standard which was developed by the Codex is milk standards. So milk to several commodity committees developed into vertical and horizontal, and there is a procedural manual and strong Codex secretariat, FAO, WHO teams. So as usual, it is collaborative, inclusive, and transparent approach. Because it is science-based, it applies the risk analysis principles, concerns for other legitimate factors. That, as I told, this is also one of the factors in the statement of principle as science means other than the science, the committee should also consider the importance of the developing countries. If developing countries are proposing any work, the committee should also consider the importance of the developing countries. And this also says to all the member countries, if they are not agreeing with any proposed standard, they may simply abstain from that and they may put some reservation, but they do not make any hindrance on the development of any standards. Then the important point is Codex text become a reference in WTO. Yes, WTO SPSTBT says that the Codex standards are reference standards. Capacity building, as explained by our madam, that is Codex Trust Fund, then co-hosting, e-working. In the Codex Trust Fund, in the later phase of the Codex Trust Fund, it mainly contribute to address the gap in the working in the national food control system and participation in the Codex. India now is the lead country. We have applied one group application in the CTF Trust Fund too. India is the lead country, and the combined project with the Bhutan and Nepal, and we are giving awareness program, and we are helping that countries in their national food control system. Then contribution by developing countries, as I told, makes Codex a truly global body. How Codex works, this I already told. It adopts standards based on science, follows an inclusive, transparent, and consensus-based process. The process is based on the Codex procedural manual with the aim of ensuring safety of health of consumer and fair practices in food trade. Relevance of the Codex to members, we'll see. So because it is a scientific principle, it has based on the scientific principle and risk analysis. It's a consensus-based approach. It covers a wide range of products, codes of practices, MRLs, all those documents. Easy to harmonize national legislations. Yeah, Codex standards are very easy to harmonize because, the risk analysis are already done by the scientific bodies, the JECFA, JEMRA, and all. They have they did the risk analysis based on the global data. So there is no issue of having harmonizing or adopting the standards of Codex. We have started harmonization since from 2016, and we are also, if required, we are also harmonizing our standards. Then it provides flexibility in adaptation, as you know. Exchange of information is standardized. It saves times and facilitate trade. Most of the all developing country may easily adopt. They can easily, as such, adopt the Codex standards. Nobody will question. Even if you adopt the Codex standards, there will not be any issue, and there will not be any trade problems. As WTO also says that the Codex is the reference standards and helps to settle the differences while trading the commodities. So work relevant to developing countries, there are several works. We can have mycotoxin, melamines, dioxins, heavy metals. So one can refer these documents in the respective committees. For example, the general standard for contaminants and toxins, we do have harmonized, and while considering our situation, for example, the standards of aflatoxins, we did harmonizations, and in case of food additives, the GSFA, we totally harmonized with the GSFA, general standard for food additives, and we do have the food category systems as per the Codex standards. Sorry, I am urging, I think I have to finish within my time. Remember, the one point is Codex is not the responsibility of one institution. That is not only FSSA. It is a shared responsibility. Contribution by states, region, and contribution to the Codex is by industry, academia, scientists. So these are the shared responsibility in totality. So what is the use of Codex in India's food control system? Here, the Codex principles and guidelines in the procedural manuals establishes these some 13 principles to have a good national food control system, one of which is the main principle is protection of consumer. Yes, our main mandate of the act is to protect the consumer health, to give safe and wholesome food to the consumer. So this is we are doing. Then second principle is whole chain approach. Yes, from the farm to fork, we are having all the rules and regulation as defined in our act, except some the products which are in the hands of the farmers as defined in the act. Then principle 3, transparency. Yes, in our national food control system, we do have transparency. We used to consult all the stakeholders, and we do have the system of draft notification, getting the comments and suggestions. So the transparency is maintained. It is mentioned in the section 18 of the Act. Then principle 4, roles and responsibility. Yes, it describes our national food control systems, also describes roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders, consistency and impartiality. Yes, we do have the same national control system, same principle in our national control system. Risk-based, science-based decision. Yes, as per our panel committee, our standards are based on science. Then cooperation and coordinations with all the stakeholders, all the ministries. We used to have the shadow committees. Now it has been rearranged as Codex coordination group, which has all the stakeholders, all the ministries, including the panel members, the consumer, and all, as well as the private NGOs. Then take preventive measures. Yes, our main mandate is prevention only. Then self-assessment and review procedures. Yeah, we used to review our standards, we used to review our regulations, and accordingly we used to make amendment based on the update in the food technology field. Then recognition of other systems. That is like equivalence agreement. This also, one of the requirement in the WTO SPS agreements. We used to have a lot of agreements with other our trade partners and the equivalents that is existing in our national food control system. Then legal foundation. Yes, this Codex principle, as well as our the national food control system, it lays the legal foundation in the food trade. Principle 2 is harmonization with the international standards, that is Codex standards that I already told. Yes, we do harmonization with the Codex. The last principle is need resources, human and financials. Yeah, we do have a lot of resources, scientific institutions, scientific academia, private sectors. We do have all such of resources. So these are the 13 principles which are established by this Codex. So we do have compliance of these principles in our national food control system. So how we relating that Codex WTO? In the WTO, SPS, TBT, the main principle is members are first, they have to establish sanitary and phytosanitary measures for the protection of human health. While establishing such sanitary and phytosanitary measures, it should be a science-based standard, so that would not constitute a disuse restriction on the international trade. These are the requirement of WTO. Then the last requirement is members are encouraged to base their SPS measures on international standards, guidelines, or recommendations where they exist. They are the recommendations. So accordingly, the specific reference, as per the SPS, is the guidelines and recommendation established by the Codex Alimentarius or the reference standards. So the member countries may make their standards consistent with the international standards and guidelines, and the process is called harmonizations. So we can accept that based on this, we are not, I can say that we are complying with the requirement of the SPS also. So in the last few slides, based on the several points I put before you, we have to agree with these statements that the Codex is the reference standard under WTO. Yes, that the Codex standards are the international standards, that we need to harmonize standards with the Codex for compliance with the WTO. Yes, we are doing that. To improve domestic market, including imports, we need to upgrade to international standard, that the international reference standard is Codex. That to enhance exports, we need to make use of international standards so that there will not be any barrier in the international trade. So if we all are agreeing with these points, then the last, then we should consider the prerequisite. Need to prioritize. Our country, our stakeholders should prioritize our work. What is the need in India? What is the need in region? Accordingly, we should come up with the document, the text, standards, and we should be in position to propose newer proposal in the Codex fraternity. Need a national Codex structure, yes. As mentioned by Mr. Abhinav, and as well as our honorable chairperson, we have a strong national Codex structure. Then need a strong teamwork. Yeah, it is also that. We need a rules and procedure. Yeah, in NCCP, we have established the guidelines and rules and procedures to participate in the Codex related work. Obviously, the last one is we need a budget. So with this, I concluding my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karthiken sir. It was a very comprehensive overview of the structure of Codex, various committees, various procedures which are involved, and what is it that we need to do to make sure that we effectively participate in that in terms of those principles. And I am already seeing a lot of congratulatory messages coming in the chat box saying that this was probably one of the most comprehensive presentations that they have seen on Codex.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. So, in the interest of time, let's move on to the next session, which is a panel discussion, where I have the pleasure of having a very seasoned set of panelists with us, and they all deal with different aspects of Codex. So, if on one hand we have Dr. Sunil Bakshi, who has been involved in Codex activities for a very long time and is currently the head of regulations, Codex, and international cooperation as part of FSSAI. We also have Professor Bijan Mishra, who's founder of Healthy You Foundation, and he's a very well-known, well-respected voice in the consumer space as a representative of consumer interests. Then we have a very important representative from academia in the Dr. Shalini Sehgal, who is Associate Professor, Department of Food Technology in Bhaskaracharya College of Applied Sciences, Delhi. Then the other obvious important stakeholder is industry. So there is Shreya Pandey, who is co-chairing FICCI Codex Cell and is also Associate Director, Scientific and Regulatory Affairs in PepsiCo India. Now, to give the regional perspective to Codex activities, we have Teresa, who is Regulatory Affairs Manager for in Food Industry Asia, which is again a body which works on various aspects. Codex is one of them and is based in Singapore. And she has an extensive experience to how these things operate in some of the other Asian countries, and we could benefit by having her perspective on that. So let's start, because we heard Karthiken sir talking about a lot of activities which they have done. So I think just to begin with, may I go to Dr. Bakshi, because he has had a very long association with Codex activities. In terms of some of these success stories that we have experienced, or things that India has led and successfully made sure that those things reach their logical end. Over to you, Dr. Bakshi. I think you are on mute.
You are on mute. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Jasveer, and good morning, everyone. This question, of course, it deserves a very good and long response. But given the paucity of time, I think I have to be very brief. In fact, as we talk of the successes of India, I think there are several facets to it. Be it the standards development, be it the working of the Codex Alimentarius Commission as such, or regarding our, say, leadership role in taking up certain activities in the Codex. There are multiple aspects of our achievements. Of course, I remember that India has been active in Codex right since maybe late 90s, 98 or 99, when Milk Committee was actively participated by India. And some of the achievements, great achievements, were in that committee made by India. And I'll just, list a couple of these. You see, our predominant milk production is of buffalo milk. So buffalo milk was not recognized as a raw material for many of the cheeses in Codex standards. It was only cow milk. So India, during those times, teamed up with the International Dairy Federation, and they made it a point that buffalo milk is also recognized as a type of milk which can be used in the cheese standards. So this was incorporated. That was the first achievement as regards the definition of milk was concerned. Then subsequently, there were Codex was developing a code of hygienic practices for milk and milk products. And when during the development of this Codex, we learned that our system of dairying, which is basically the smallholder dairying, it is not being recognized there. So they would insist on having, proper housings for animals, having feeding stalls and all that, machine milking and all that. So all this was not done in our case, but it was through interventions of the Indian delegation that ultimately the committee came to a conclusion, yes, this is also a system of dairying. And accordingly, the code of practices that was developed took into consideration our situation also, and accordingly framed various measures which were appropriate for us. So machine milking was not necessary then. So likewise, many other provisions were included in that. Then I'll go to another, say, important aspect was the general principles of food hygiene and HACCP, which was recently revised by the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Of course, in the first time when it was developed, that time also India was participating in this. But during the revision, we also made it a point that food safety systems should not necessarily mean that you have to have HACCP always, because that is not possible in case of very tiny and small businesses, and particularly those who are handling foods of very low risk. So during this revision process, it was made by a point by us that even good hygienic practices, if we implement them properly, for certain situations and for certain businesses, it should be sufficient to achieve the food safety objective. So HACCP is not necessary always. So that's a good, big sort of a support for our tiny and small businesses. Then, as Mr. Karthikeyan has already said that the guidelines for non-retail containers, that was a proposal made by India. Of course, it was a very painstaking sort of, discussions on this, making the fraternity to agree to have this work on the table of Codex Alimentarius Commission. But yes, we succeeded. Maybe after 6-7 years, we are here with this guideline, which makes it very, easy for labeling of these non-retail containers. So that could facilitate international trade also on this. That was regarding the standards, and of course, we have many more proposals that were made as new work on which India has taken a leadership role, and they have that work has fructified into having some standards which are currently now available with the Codex Alimentarius. Then another big achievement was, of course, setting up of this Spices Committee by Codex Alimentarius Commission, which was on the basis of proposal of India. And it was a big achievement, and not I mean, achieved just like that. I remember many Indian delegations going to various regional coordinating committee meetings before the issue was discussed in commission, and convincing all the regions very effectively so that they could agree to this proposal. And then the result was that when this issue was discussed in the commission, there was overwhelming support with not a single country opposing setting of this Spices Committee. And this committee has now come out with various good standards and is uniquely also working on the development of group standards so that many commodities could be developed into a standard with just one go and not developing individuals. So that saves lots of time and efforts also.
Sure.
Of course. Yes. Can I continue for some more
please,
time?
please.
Okay. So as Chairperson Madam also said in the morning that we had a chair of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and that too was not a very that too was very good achievement. He was there as vice chair for 3 years and chair for 3 years, and that period is also very well recognized in the Codex fraternity, because I have been speaking to a lot many people, and they value his chairmanship, Mr. Dave's chairmanship of this international body. Uh, Again, we were there as coordinator for 5 years. I think it was after a lapse of 3 or 4 decades that we became coordinator for Asia. And we successfully organized 2 sessions of the regional committee meetings. And that too was noticed by the Codex fraternity based on my, say, discussions with other people of other regions. So that too was taken note by them. And during this coordinatorship, we also developed a good rapport with the regional membership. And they were sort of instilled with the confidence that the coordinator is always there to support them in terms of, in respect of any codex work, that issues or doubts that they have in mind, and also supporting them during these meetings of the codex subsidiary bodies and the commission. Another good achievement in this coordinatorship was that we developed a standard operating procedure for the whole region to collaborate on issues of codex matters, so that we can be one voice in the region. And this this SOP, standard operating procedure, was very well appreciated by all the members and even by FAOW. And in fact, they said that there are quite a number of elements within that SOP which they could work upon and develop the capacities of member countries in this region. At the same time, Karthiken said that Codex work is supported by science. So we know that there are various expert groups under FAO and WHO which are working on these scientific issues and providing risk assessment outputs to the Codex committees. And again here, experts from India, they have been participating as risk assessors in these committees, and that also, was very good for India, because our concerns could be addressed there. Of course, they are supposed to be impartial, but yes, though they know that what the situation is. And I think for the time being, this is what I wanted to say, that these are some of the achievements, but the list is endless. Given the paucity of time, it's not very, easy to, spell out everything that has been achieved by us. Thank you.
Definitely, I agree with that. So let's look at the other very important and other very important stakeholder who is actually at the heart of Codex functioning, which is consumer. because the overall objective of Codex, apart from ensuring fair trade practices, is actually ensuring consumer health and safety. So let's go to Professor Mishra and understand. So, sir, if you could elaborate that, I mean, how do you look at Codex and how has it helped in ensuring and helping the cause of consumer safety, consumer health, not only in India but maybe globally, because you have had a vast engagement with Codex.
Thank
Over
you.
to you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jasbir, and thanks for giving me this opportunity, Vicky, to share my views. And of course, we heard very eminent people, starting from the chairperson of FSSAI, Sunil ji, and of course, Karthikeya, who gave us the complete, comprehensive kind of a download on what Codex is and what it's doing. I would like to first also thank our co-partner from Singapore, who has taken time to co-partner with us. It's a great work going on. My only small issue is, as you all heard, Karthikeya, the first top thing comes is consumer protection in Codex in principles. And whenever we talk of international standards, and I'm very happy to see today that I've been witness to CCFS, the Central Committee on Food Standards, which was existing prior to our Food Safety Authority under the Food Adulteration Act. I was also privy to the various developments which took place, ultimately having a cell in FICCI to work on Codex. And I'm so happy that that cell has now grown to a structure which is very institutionalized and doing an excellent work. So congratulations for that. And I also was very fortunate to have attended several Codex meetings in the past, where as a consumer representative, I learned a lot, and where we came back home and told the policymakers that there is a need to bring a kind of an institutionalized structure, especially led by industry. And it is happening, which I'm very happy about. My focus is, how do we percolate this to the states of our country, the 36 states? You see, we have to focus in terms of engaging with them in a very, very focused manner so that it trickles down to the end user or to the consumer, who are the beneficiaries of all these efforts which we are doing. We saw, that how much of infrastructure is being created within Codex. So many committees, so many meetings which are going on, so much consultations, so much of resources of countries globally are being pulled together in the interest of the consumer. And at the end of the day, we have to build that trust in that consumer, that the food which they get in the supply chain is safe and is of high quality, which can be compared to the global standards. We have to ensure that we go forward in a manner where all the 36 states and union territories of our country, they come into the fold and their capacity is built, which I frankly feel, I mean, I may be wrong, but I still feel that there's a lot of work to be done there. The states are not yet plugged in terms of the kind of work which FSSAI is conducting in terms of Codex and in terms of setting standards. Because if you ask the top most 8 expectations of a consumer, world over, the study has revealed that the first topmost thing the consumer expects is standard. Then, of course, comes transparency, accountability, accessibility and things of that sort. But standard is the most important expectation of a consumer. And when we talk about that, it has to be converted into a local language. People should be able to relate it. It should be seen that people should understand that if there is an FSSAI logo on a product which is there today in packaged food, that means it is safe. It is as per standard. And there should be documentation done in terms of surveillance done on behalf of the consumers, so that the consumers believe that the process and the system is in place and functional. and it is working in the interest of the consumer. Somewhere we have to build that trust. Somewhere we have to build that kind of a partnership. You see, I'm so happy that you invited me, because at least as a consumer representative, I try to speak as much as possible in terms of what people share with me on a day-to-day basis, who are consumers. And when they share with me, I take this opportunity or such opportunities to convey their feelings to you. What I am saying is what people have shared with me, that how do I ensure that the quality which is being mandated or the quality which is voluntarily being said by the seller is actually adhered with. And we have mechanisms to test that. And we have very robust systems to assure that, and that is what is important. And I want to share with you all a small incident which happened on 21st of September this year. As a consumer organization, one of my organizations called Consumer Online Foundation, where we do a lot of work on consumer complaint redressal services, we went in for ISO, 9001/2015. And it took us only 5 months, even less than 5 months in fact, to get ourselves certified by an accreditation body to be certified as an organization which is as per international standards on consumer complaint redressal services. And let me tell you, it was not expensive. And it was not a rocket science. Only thing we did was we documented what we were doing, and we got ourselves audited by a third party to say whether we were doing it right or wrong. And you will be very happy to hear that my team was able to have not a single non-compliance. And that was possible only because we had processes in place, systems in place. The only thing which was missing was documentation, which we did, and we got certified. My appeal to everybody is that when an organization with only 4.5 people working, if we can get certified by a third party, and if industry, which are having hundreds of people working with great processes in place, why can't you voluntarily get yourself certified time to time? Make it public. Make things transparent and come to the international standards which Codex is trying to set up. So I'm very happy that we are not only harmonizing ourselves with the global standards, but the other countries are also harmonizing with us. And as Sunilji said, he highlighted some of our achievements. But the most important thing is, at the end of the day, the bottom of the pyramid, where people who are beneficiaries, who are even, spending the scarce resource to access food, are they being assured good quality, safe food, which is wholesome as per the mandate of FSSAI? And that is what is our goal. That is what is our objective. And constantly we are trying to do that. And as you know, FSSAI is also constantly trying to improve the processes and systems in place to build that trust. But the only thing now, and I would like to close here saying, please focus on the state governments. I just came back from Dimapur, Nagaland. And I must tell you that there's huge talent in our country. Youths are eager to get involved into such kind of an activities where their talent can be tapped in a manner where we can not only give them a good employment, but make India globally known to promote the best standards of the world. And that is what should be our ambition. And we should start in the domestic market first in a good manner so that we can go global. And there are a number of areas where you all know that India is sought after in terms of to access Indian products abroad because of our good standards, because of our good processes, which we have kept in place. So we have to sustain that. And as this is the World Quality Month, November is observed as the World Quality Month, I would like to convey to you all, the theme is sustainability, product, improving product, people, and the planet. That's the theme for this year. And I would like to say that let's look at the product, the people behind that product, and of course, the planet that is our ecosystem. So we cannot compromise on any of these three things. And let's go ahead to give that smile to the consumer and that confidence to the consumer that whatever is made available to them in the supply chain is safe and has a high quality of international standards. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasbir, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to take questions, but unfortunately, I have to go for another meeting at 12 o'clock, and I promised them that I'll come at 12. So you'll have to excuse me. And all my panel members, great job. Keep doing this big job, what a great work which you all are doing. And involve and engage the consumers as much as you can in all your activities. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Professor Mishra. You have always been a guiding light for us because consumer interest is at the center of whatever we do in Codex. Thank you very much, and thanks for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you. If you allow me,
if we,
can I?
sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So the other very important stakeholder looking at the objective of improving India's ability to engage with Codex agenda is the scientific fraternity and academia, because they play a much bigger role when it comes to developing positions which are your country positions. So let's hear from Dr. Shalini in terms of what are her views uh, in the role that academia can play in India's Codex activities. And she comes with a very unique advantage that she's not only a person with academia background, but has also worked in FSSAI for a very important stint in one of their divisions. So over to you, Dr. Shalini. And I can also refer one question which one of the participants has asked, that how students can participate in Codex activities. Over to you.
Dr. Jasbir, a very good morning to everybody. In fact, we are getting into afternoon right now. So Codex, like we have been hearing experts talking about Codex since morning, and I like to focus on two basic areas. Right in the beginning, two things which Karthiken also mentioned is shared responsibility. The minute you say shared responsibility, academia and the scientist community, all the scientific community, is part of that stakeholder process. That's one thing. So we are there. But how to engage us? This is something which we need to understand and deliberate more. And the second part which we are talking today is whenever you talk about food safety system mechanism in any country, you need the people, the human resources. So I feel training the people, the capacity building, and communicating. As Mr. Sunil Bakshi, he has been already saying that India is doing fantabulous work when we come to Codex, and FSSAI is looking into the standards. So I think academia and the scientific community is already engaged in this science-based standard process. And since the minute we say science, it brings in a kind of certain objectivity. So to train people to be objective, that is the role, that is the duty which comes to us as a community. And I think we have been playing our role very well, but there are gap areas. I was listening to Professor Mishra right now, and I totally understand, and I'm in sync with him when he says that we need to do more. Yes, the standards are there, but whenever you talk about standards, it's not about the implementation or the regulatory angle. We need to focus on the non-regulatory activities, that is communication, reaching out to all the stakeholders, building the trust. And this is where the community, the people who are teaching within the classrooms, they need to reach out. And somebody raised the question, how can students be engaged? Engagement at any level needs awareness, and that should be the first foot forward, that we need to understand what Codex is all about. And what I personally feel at this point, yes, Codex India is doing great work, but it's a kind of a niche, People who are engaged with the system, they are aware, but people who are the stakeholders who need to understand, we need to reach out. So that is the job, and this is what we perceive at this point, that the academia and the scientist committee or the community, they can, not only talk about research, what is happening, but we need to percolate that knowledge to the state level, like Professor Mishra was saying, engaging the state. So what's the easiest mechanism? You have universities, you have institutes across pan India. Engaging them means you will reach out to the last stakeholder, the base of the pyramid, which was being talked. And when you're looking at people, the experts who are participating in these committees, they have to be unbiased, right? So they have to come with, they need to be trained being unbiased, that is very, very important, wherever you go at a global forum and where you are engaging as a regional expert, being unbiased and putting forth the things. So training is important, I feel. And this is something how to implement. Karthiken was talking that you have the documents, you have things in place, but how to participate in the meeting, how to represent your country, that is also which can be taken by the Codex, national point right now, and reach out, awareness, capacity building, technical know-how. I think these are the three buzzwords, Dr. Singh, which we need to work together, and teamwork was mentioned, definitely. So reaching out to people can be given to the academia or the people who are researching on those particular topics, because food safety is very, very dynamic. It keeps on changing. It's not about the evolving needs of our country, but it is also about the challenges, the new challenges we face, and for facing those challenges, I feel that we need to be prepared, and people who are part of the food industry, regulatory, they need to be trained, and we need to reach out to people in a very, very inclusive approach, including all. And I think inclusiveness will lead to effectiveness. That is how I would like to conclude at this point.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Shalini. Very relevant points. So now let's come to some of those people who have really played an important role in industry's engagement, or rather shaping up industry's engagement in Codex agenda in India as well as in the region. So coming to you, Shreya, one that obviously you have had a very long engagement with the Codex. So how do you look at the role that industry plays in the Codex agenda, and any words of advice for members from industry who are there on the call today, that how do they prepare themselves, and how do they play a much bigger role in the Codex discussions? Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Jasveer. Um, I think industry has been a partner in the Codex journey for a long time. I think I remember 2005 and 6 when the initial FICCI Codex cell formations happened, and when the initial discussions used to happen at the erstwhile Ministry of Health, Ministry of Food Processing, um, where the understanding of Codex, how the regulations are shaped up in national level, taking into account a global standard. I think we've come a long way. One example that I'd like to give is of food additives. Uh, when there was a time when a single additive used to take about 8 to 10 years before it saw the light of the day in a national regulation, um, in one category, one additive. uh, that's when sometime in FICCI Codex Cell we started on asking for an effort towards an entire regulatory revamp, with Codex harmonization. And thanks to the great partnership that we've had with the government and other stakeholders. Um, at that time, Dr. Dave led the entire discussion on Codex harmonization, and especially on certain horizontal standards, one of them being the general standards of food additives. And we were able to review the entire risk assessment based globally approved uh, additives in various categories, and that entire framework of getting the general standard of food additives, the concept of 16 categories, subcategories, individual additives, their maximum levels, pre-vetted through an FAO WHO joint expert committee like JECFA, which required minimal review at a local level. That I think was like one of the largest achievements that industry played a very key role in, because many industry players participate on a global level from various organizations and countries at Codex to get these approved across the world. Another great example, I think, is of general standards of labeling of prepackaged foods. Um, Both in the pre-FSSAI and post-FSSAI stages, we've seen that there are many material transformations that our labeling regulations have seen, whether it is the uptake of the nutritional labeling, or it is the quantitative ingredient declarations, or it is allergen declarations, or it is many other areas. Uh, Labeling and the committee of labeling has been a key favorite, and if Dr. Mishra was there, he would support me, because even 10 years, 15 years back, he had been a part of how the labeling regulations are getting shaped up and getting harmonized at a national level. So I think we've been key partners in bringing that knowledge base to the Codex. And I think now we are at a stage where we need to move to the next level, where we bring in more data. I think that part is probably something that we need to work on now, because data is hugely needed now that our base levels are set for uh, standards, having the vertical and horizontal standards that Codex has, and even the code of practices or the guidelines that we have recently adopted from Codex. Now, for the next level of Codex participation, I think we need to, from industry, partnering a lot with our academia and research and laboratory partners, is to get data. One area I feel, I think, as India, we need to kind of put our hands out on our is the dietary exposure and the intake assessment data. The reason why a lot of participation at a scientific risk assessment level can happen is because nationally you have datas available in larger economies like the Europe or US or Australia or Canada, because they have a robust mechanism of dietary exposure assessment by which they are able to estimate how much of a food or exposure that the population or the subgroup is consuming. And that there are acceptable dietary modeling techniques that are used to conduct dietary exposure assessments, and these potential exposures therefore on a population, whether it is on additives or on pesticides or on nutrients or on chemicals or on ingredients or substances added to food, they have a nutrition and health purpose. And that combination of consumption data with the food chemical concentration data can help us in setting and presenting data that can be used to set the food standards, can be used to estimate public health effect of those chemicals in light of newer information or health-based guidance values or any concerns on the established categories. And while we have ventured on certain monitoring and surveillances on national level, like on milk and oil and certain sectors which are considered to be more risky, there is still a need to develop this food information tool, which can be then used to kind of do or complete a risk analysis process, and then be able to collectively take this data to a GEMS database, to a JECFA, to be able to say that, this is the risk assessment and exposure to an Indian population, which should also be considered in the data. I know there have been pockets of data assembling that we have submitted to the GEMS database and others, but I think there is a need to work towards greater data generation at that area. With our lab infrastructures, etc., improving, I think we're at the right place to kind of embark on this journey. So I think that would be a great step in the next 5 to 10 years if we can get into that position of creating that data.
Sure. Thanks, Shreya. Thanks for laying out some of those areas that we now need to work on and pick up as we sort of transition from a very ad hoc kind of an engagement towards a very structured and a very focused, result-oriented engagement with Codex, both as a country as well as on behalf of industry. Thanks, Shreya. So now let's coming to you, Teresa. You have a very wider perspective on how industry is engaging with Codex agenda at a regional level and in many countries within Asia. So how do you look at industry's engagement in these activities? And are there some sort of success stories or examples that you would like to share with us who are on the call, so that we can also look at them and try to replicate? Although looking at the participants and some of the comments, I've seen that the participants are not limited to India. There are participants even from Gambia and all, which have joined today, and that's a very pleasant thing to know. So over to you, Teresa.
Thanks, Dr. Jasville, and thanks for the invitation to FIA to be here as well to contribute our inputs on this very important topic. And I fully agree with the title of the webinar and just a very strong link between the role of Codex and also how it helps to facilitate trade. And I think I would just like to start by seeing how we see many different pieces that were laid out to, like in our discussion today, like food safety, food standards, capacity building, consumer, and of course trade. So how I see is that like all these are different moving pieces, and each are like moving according to their own speed. And I think that there's really a need for us to coordinate the efforts to bring together the different moving pieces, even as we talk about international developments and standards that are discussed at the Codex level. I think first and foremost, it's really about industry awareness about the kind of basis of Codex and the reliability of Codex as well, and how it links to trade. And that's where I think what FICCI is doing today, it's very important in terms of bringing that awareness to the broader industry and other stakeholders as well. And I think it's really not just industry and also the regulators, but also other stakeholders from the consumer agencies and also academia in providing that scientific opinion and also evidences to help support the overall position that's being put forward to Codex. And you mentioned about success stories. For FIE, we have been an observer and the Codex platform for several years now, and we have been following more closely on the discussion around CCFL, CCFA, and of course, recently there are a lot of developments in CCFIX as well. But in terms of the success stories on the impact of Codex on trade, what we want to share is the establishment of Codex limits for contaminants in food, whereby a couple years back, Codex established the limits for arsenic in rice. So that really places a key reference point for trading partners in accepting or rejecting imports. So some context to that is that prior to the setting of the Codex limits, exporters were often faced with strict limits that are set by importing countries, which were mainly based on precautionary measures rather than the kind of scientific evidences that were put out. So as a result, we do face rejection from markets at the port, and that led to economic losses as well for the exporting countries. So I think that specific example of a limit that's being agreed and established at Codex really helped to put out an internationally agreed limits of contaminants for key commodities like rice, and not just help to build trading partners' confidence in food safety, but also at the same time to allow food to be traded without the unnecessary barriers. So I think even as discussion and Codex continues to develop and the work on contaminants as well as other discussion, I think the kind of assessment from JECFA proves to be very important in setting a benchmark or guidance for countries to consider and to adopt as well. And I think earlier someone mentioned about the need. This helps to reduce the kind of duplication for countries to redo another risk assessment, but this helps to establish a very robust framework and considering the limited resources from developing countries as well. That's very helpful. So so the kind of assessment that's put out by JECFA, I think there needs to also be a balance with the potential adverse impact on international trade as well. So while on one hand we have those findings, but on the other hand, it's also important to consider what could be the impact onto trade and how can we resolve that, or what would be the way to go about it. So I think that's and another discussion that needs to come into the picture as well. Yeah, so I'll stop here. Maybe back to you, Dr.
Sure.
Jasfield.
Thanks, Teresa. So we are running short of time, and this topic is such that we can have a very long and prolonged sessions on individual aspects that all of you have raised. I'm picking up some of these questions which have come up through the chat box, and two questions which I think Dr. Bakshi is best placed to answer. One which somebody has raised is that the Codex standards, they are voluntary in nature. So how do you enforce these standards when they are adopted in countries? It's a question which one of the international participant has raised. The other aspect which I heard what Shreya and Teresa was mentioning around lack of data. So, and that has been one of the challenging area for us in India. So how do you deal with that issue of lack of scientific data to really support the positions that we have to take? Over to you, sir. So you are on mute.
My apologies. I forget I'm in unmute. So the first question that Codex standards are voluntary in nature, yes, it's a fact. And actually, Codex has been set up by WHO and FAO as a joint food standards body. But yes, the standards are voluntary in nature. And the question of how do we sort of enforce these then? One is that the WTO agreements have already mentioned that these are the reference standards for trade. So obviously, whenever there is any international trade of foods taking place, so these standards can be a point of, say, a reference for resolution of any conflicts or of any sort. But as far as enforcement of these standards at national level are concerned, countries have been adopting these standards and incorporating these in their own regulations by way of, taking the standards as such and putting them in the regulations or modifying these standards to the local context or the situation. So once these are taken into the domestic regulation by any country, then they become enforceable. So this is how these standards could be taken up for enforcement at the national level, domestic level. I hope that addresses the query that has been raised. And on the second part that you raised about the data, lack of data, that issue has been mentioned by Shreya and also by the speaker from Singapore. In fact, I was thinking that what Shreya has said is very right, in the sense that the future work in the Codex will all depend upon what data we provide, and our participation in the Codex work will be very much dependent on that. We need to generate very robust data, and in fact, as we know that many of these codes of practices or standards, they have become dated also. Like we had the revision of lead standards for many commodities in the recent past, and when these lead levels in various food commodities were being reviewed, we felt the need for data. And I can give you an example of certain commodities like jams and jellies. We were confronted with a sort of a situation that the reduction was taking from 1 mg to 0.1 mg ppm. So we needed data for that. So it was a long exercise that was then undertaken by Food Safety Authority in collaboration with other institutions and of course industry also. So when we got the data, then we realized that we can't be comfortable with the level of 0.1 ppm. We have to settle down at 0.4 or 0.5 ppm. And that's how the Codex also then agreed when the data was presented, and they agreed that yes, it has to be settled at 0.4 or 0.5 ppm. So the future work of Codex will be requiring lots of these data sets. And we need to work on that. Our industry, our academia, research institutions, and the Food Authority itself. And I mean, all the relevant stakeholders, they will have to work on this aspect also and generate very robust data so that the positions that we have on various work items of the Codex, we will be needing this data and we need to generate it at the earliest possible. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, sir. Thanks a lot. The other area that some people have picked up as a question was around that has Codex helped businesses? Any specific examples? So Shreya, can you share any specific example? Probably that question, I think, also points to the fact that we need to talk more about Codex and the role that it has played. Because, for example, the example that Dr. Bakshi shared about incorporating buffalo milk as one of the raw materials in cheese standards is one very glaring example, which probably even the dairy industry doesn't know in India, that how Indian government has allowed them to use buffalo milk as a raw material for making cheese, which otherwise they were not able to use. And similar many other examples. So probably we need to talk more about that. But over to you, Shreya, for this particular question.
I think many examples with the Codex harmonization initially only I said that, you know, one additive for one category used to take us 8 to 9 years for wait for the JECFA approval, come back to the Indian authorities, review at a panel level for them. We've had the entire GSFA brought into our regulations with that structure and framework, where not only for standardized for proprietary products, for many other products, additives have been allowed, where a pre-risk assessment has been done at JECFA, and there is an adoption or an harmonization approach that has been taken. Many at that time, many decisions have been taken where we were already using, we had national level data, and Codex was slightly behind, whether it is on certain colors, whether it is on certain antioxidants, where industry was benefited to have, taken national level data and taken those calls to allow them. And that data was then taken to Codex to look at the reverse updation at Codex level. Similarly, is the case with the ones that you mentioned on vertical standards, mango chutney standards. Many national standards have been put up in Codex, even within the food categorization system. The recognition of dahi, recognition of lassi, recognition of so many products which are traditional and Indian in nature have been put back into the Codex standards to look at those regional bits being incorporated into global standards. And dairy is a large example where we've been through NDDB been participating for the last 2 decades now to ensure that our national interests are put into place through the Codex standard amendments, taking into account the national realities that we have. So many examples, many examples.
Thanks, Shreya. I know that there are many examples, but then I would also like to encourage all the participants to get more engaged with the Codex activities which are being undertaken by FICCI Codex Cell, and they can reach out to Priyanka Sharma or Varsha Yadav, so that you really know what is the latest which is happening, and also you can give your inputs so that Indian delegation takes a stand which is in the best interest of all of you. The other and the last question I think that I'll be able to pick up is for Teresa, that is there something which is happening around harmonization in the Asian countries? I know that's a very favorite question in many forums.
Yeah, that's a keyword for FIA actually, and I think that's something that we have been also working alongside our different partners and also regulatory bodies as well, to in terms of how can we use Codex as a reference in our regulatory framework. But I think just to a quick comment on moving forward, I think we are also rethinking this idea of harmonization and how can we incorporate other principles like shared responsibility, forward-looking, and flexibility as part of our, even as we look at what would be useful and based on the current context as well, and so much has evolved, and I think it's also FI has been also trying to think of like what would be the framework and the kind of how would things look like even as we think about the responsibility of industry, consumers. So I think that touches like that aspect of looking ahead, and of course harmonization would continue to be an important piece, and within FIE we have been also sharing our experiences in terms of harmonization for labeling or nutrition labeling, and also import and export requirements. So these will still have to continue, but on top of that, we see that there are other things that we need to take on board as well, like the specific examples I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Teresa. So with this, because we have run completely out of time, and my apologies, we ran actually almost 25 minutes over our scheduled time, but somehow this topic and this agenda is close to my heart. I can't stop exploring it more and more every time we start discussing about Codex. So thank you everybody for giving your time. And let me now take it over to Priyanka Sharma to offer a formal vote of thanks to everybody. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you everyone for this wonderful and brainstorming session. So we are extremely thankful to all our esteemed panelists and Mr. Karthiken sir and obviously our CP ma'am FSSAI for sharing their expertise and insights for making this a very wonderful session. We truly actually acknowledge the FSSAI for extending this support to FICCI, and we're also very much thankful to FIA for being our key partner in sharing the regional perspective. Last but not the least, our special thanks to the participants from various sectors for making this webinar a successful one. We assure you that FICCI will keep working on this Codex agenda to take the food regulatory ecosystem to the new heights. So with this note, we conclude our webinar session. Thank you all very much for your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thanks.
Everyone, thank you.